Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Melissa Longo. As a chiropractor, I believe we have the profound ability to impact our communities and people's health on a global level, while also enjoying rich and rewarding personal lives and giving attention to the things that matter to us. Each week, you'll hear an inspiring conversation to give you ideas and insights to rock your practice, pursue your passions, find more connection and meaning in your life, and create a life and business that works for you. Hey there, listeners. Once again, I am thrilled to be standing here in my office about to have an amazing conversation with an amazing woman, and hopefully you can all learn from something Lisa Olszewski shares with us today as well. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Hello. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I love these conversations, and I know that in our pre-chat we talked about a whole bunch of things. So before we jump into some of those topics for today, I'd love it if you could give everyone a brief sort of synopsis of what is Dr. Lisa up to these days, and what do we need to know about you?
Oh, what am I up to? I feel like I'm always running at 100 miles a minute, right? So I am an upper cervical chiropractor in southeastern Michigan, right outside of Ann Arbor, and have been in practice now, graduated from Palmer 15 years ago, which is really hard to believe because I still think I'm a new grad. And then I think we all realize that we're not, right?
Yeah.
But working with that, very involved in the profession in different aspects. I do a lot here with the Michigan Association of Chiropractors, along with the League of Chiropractic Women. And then I'm sure we'll do a little bit with this, but it's one of those things that I feel like we all get to some point in our practice life where, or at least for me, I was like, how can I serve even more people? And created the American Institute of Healthy Living last year. So that way I could help more people outside of the four walls of my practice. And so that is a whole nother job that I've been doing. I don't want to say it's not a job. It's something fun that I'm doing, but just helping to influence the health of nations, I should say it that way, with a very strong holistic chiropractic philosophy. How about that?
That sounds awesome. So that is a series of programs that you're offering. I know you did the Keto Summit.
We did. And so it's through virtual summits, through some courses and all of that. And so we're actually in the process of relaunching this Keto Summit. So it's really exciting. The feedback we got the first time around was just spectacular. So I love it. I know it's one of those things that God put me on earth to really help people with their health. And I've always said, I was meant to be a chiropractor, and it's just another aspect and avenue within this holistic healing that we have.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for us as docs to remember that obviously the things that people are doing outside our practices will either support their healing with their chiropractic care, or it'll go against the results that they could have. Right. And so you taking it on yourself to help educate people on some of these lifestyle factors, I think is really powerful, and certainly something that a lot of docs will want to be doing. How did you get started? Like, was it something that you were doing in your practice, like with classes first, or did you just decide to totally jump into the online world? Can you take us through that? Because I know for a lot of docs, they've been listening, oh yeah, that's cool, I want to be doing that, but how do they get started?
Right. And that is actually, this is one of those things where you look at like the past several years of, at least for me, I looked at the last several years of my life, and I realized that every setback that I had, it all led to this. So I've always taught nutrition in my class, or in my classes, in my office. I went through James Chestnut's Wellness Diplomate, and that's where I was so fortunate, and you've probably done that too, but I did that my very first year in practice. So I have a very wellness-based practice based off of going through his courses. But I was a person that, even though I was eating 100% organic, I was eating, very clean. I was doing paleo for years. I was CrossFitting. For me, I was struggling to be a size 12. And I felt like I was being judged by my patients, that when I would tell them that I never ate sugar, that I, was a clean eater, I felt like they were looking at me thinking I was lying to them, but I wasn't. Like, it was the truth, but my body just wasn't responding as I thought it should. And we know as chiropractors, our body adapts perfectly. Mm-hmm. So obviously I was stressed out to the max on all sorts of stuff. My body was responding perfectly. So with that, I did a very strict weight loss program. And at that time period, I followed really strict intermittent fasting. And it was something that a lot of the male bloggers were speaking about. And I did this, and I did it for several months on end, 24/7, 7 days a week, months on end, and it tanked my health. So now, like if you Google intermittent fasting and for women, you see all sorts of different topics out there, but at that point it wasn't. And so I went through a massive health challenge. And so over the course of that next year and struggling and trying to figure out what happened and why my body responded the way it did, I regained my health, which was great. But with that, I was like, there's a lot of other women out there struggling because we're all following the male bloggers. And guess what? You know, men and women respond differently with different situations. So that's really how it started. And that was the catalyst. So I was like, I've got to be able to help even more people than just those people within my practice walls. And so I looked on different aspects, whether I wanted to do a podcast, you know, I looked at all different things. And then it was just like, this just happened. And it's really, like I said, there's somebody else, like definitely it's a God thing because, the way things just fell into place, I knew this was absolutely the path I was supposed to go on.
Yes. Oftentimes one of my mentors has always said ease is a result of an innately driven process, right? When things are lined up, oftentimes the serendipity is there too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I love that you shared that, you know, your setbacks have led you to this point because oftentimes we can look back and realize that. But when you're going through shit, sometimes you're like, what is this message here? What is this meaning for me? And then you can look back and realize that all the pieces fit together.
Right. And that was, I mean, I remember sitting, you know that I travel a lot. So I'm on airplanes all the time. And I remember the exact flight I was on and who I was texting because I was going to fly out somewhere for somebody else to just take a look, just, you know, because as chiropractors and as healers, we look at ourselves, but we don't have those outside eyes on us. Mm-hmm. And so I was just like, I need help. And then something else that week, because I never got the text message sent off because, you know, I had to put away my phone on the plane and just everything that happened that following week fell into place and it led me to where exactly I am today. So it all worked out. So in that deepest, darkest moment of, you know, screaming like, why can't I figure this out? It all came to place.
So, fasting is a hot thing these days, and a lot of people are seeing a ton of success with it. What did you feel? But it's also a topic of the differences with men and women, and I've even shared that with some of the women in my practice, like that are doing. I'm saying you got to be careful. This is something to keep in mind. Is there anything key that you want to share right now? Because I'm sure some of these listeners are dealing with this themselves or know people in their practice. And just a quick.
Absolutely. Because like for me, and that's where I always just tell people fasting is amazing. And I still do intermittent fasting. I just don't do it 7 days a week anymore for months on end because that's where I was at. Like I was literally doing a very strict eating window, a very
so were you
short
doing
time period every single day.
16-8 or like?
Yeah, exactly. And then there were some days it was like 20, right? So I was really strict with it. And it worked great. Hey, I lost weight. And I even went round and round with some chiropractors because they would look at me and they're like, Lisa, look at Paleolithic era, men and women both used to fast. And I remember another conversation that I just looked at one of the guys. I said, absolutely, I get it. But men and women work differently. And especially for women, like if we're put into a fasting situation, like a starvation, quote unquote, time period, and it's a cycling woman, guess what, innately, think of what the body's going to do. It's going to say, oh, stop it. Wait a minute. She doesn't have enough calories right now. We better make sure she doesn't get pregnant. So we better really start messing with her hormones. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. And so we start to see a lot of those issues if people are doing it nonstop because you think we're going into a starvation mode. And so a couple days a week is absolutely fine. 5 days a week, just different things and playing it around, but always having that feeding time period at some point, just to let your body know you're not starving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree 100%. And it's all the research that I've been reading, because I've been doing it, for over a year now, maybe a year and a half. And it started just like 1 day a week. I would just do a reset 1 day a week. The biggest thing that I noticed was, and I wasn't doing it for weight loss. I was doing it because my trainer suggested it for digestive health reasons. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just try it. I could not get over, and I still, cannot get over the clarity of thought that results from it. But having said that, it doesn't mean that I eat like crap the rest of the week. It's, how do I manage the rest of my diet so that I can feel good and maintain the effects of the fast and look at it from a cellular regeneration standpoint, but not so much that it interferes with my body's adaptive mechanisms. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, and I love it because we have so many people, so many great resources within chiropractic that are doing a lot of the guided fasting time periods right now. And those are, 24-hour fasts, like they're great. But just like I said, I took it to the extreme and just don't anything that probably not the best thing at the extreme. Obviously, I know it wasn't the best thing at the extreme because I know what happened with my health.
Well, and I don't know, and dudes, if for you guys listening, I mean, if your partner gets really hungry around this part of their cycle when they're ovulating and they want to eat everything in sight, that again is an adaptive innate mechanism. You know, we're not designed to be fasting when we're ovulating. Our body is trying to prepare our bodies to conceive, right? And that's the way that we're functioning. I remember my naturopath saying that, like, because I, you know, sometimes I'm just like super hungry and I can't figure it out. And she's like, well, where in your cycle? And I looked at it, yeah, that makes sense. So there are so many differences between men and women in so many ways that we are absolutely the same in practice. Let's talk a little bit about your practice life. So you've been in practice for many years. What are some of the things like that you've noticed in your practice? Have you always had your own, you know, upper cervical office? Did you transition to upper cervical after working with someone else? Or take us through that journey for you a little bit.
You know, I've been under chiropractic care since the day I was born. And so that's all I knew, traditional chiropractic. That's why I went to chiropractic school. And it was literally a knee issue that I was having while I was at Palmer. At that point, I was 23 and I couldn't walk upstairs anymore because of knee pain. But I was also training for a marathon at that time period. So I was doing a lot of running. And it was an upper cervical adjustment that got rid of my knee pain. So at that time period, I really, you know, I was really struggling through thinking like, wait a minute, this never had entered into my mind that I would be an upper cervical practitioner. And I was halfway through school, like I just said that, still assumed I was just going to practice traditional chiropractic. And then it was one of those things for me within like a month of graduation. I called the doctor I was supposed to be associating with and just told him I couldn't do it because personally for me, I felt like I was going to be a hypocrite if I practiced traditional chiropractic, yet I felt my best and was getting adjusted under upper cervical care. So I dropped everything that I knew. And at that point I said, I'll just go back to Michigan and open up a practice and figure it out on my own if this is what happens. But again, how things just line up. I had some doctors in Oklahoma call me and said, hey, we hear you're looking for a job. So I was there for a year, basically to learn how to take x-rays because all the chiropractors now, we know upper cervical x-rays are a little bit different than traditional chiropractic x-rays. So then I moved back to Michigan and opened up my own practice at the end of 2004, beginning of 2005. And that was right before the economy tanked, right? It was happening in the United States here about 2007, 2008. But because I was automotive and Michigan is automotive industry, I started my practice, a cash-based upper cervical practice, right in the midst of a really bad economy in the state of Michigan. So I never realized anything different. So it's definitely a mindset thing. So I walked in and obviously 15 years later, we're still doing awesome. I guess almost 15 years later. So it wasn't when my friends, I remember in 2008 that would call and say, oh, I'm really struggling. Starbucks closed in my town or whatever it is. I'm like, stop. Nope. It's your mind space. We have to shift that because if anybody can open up a cash-based upper cervical practice, and I mean, we had double-digit unemployment in the state of Michigan during that time period. I'm like, it's all headspace.
So what would you say to docs? Like, how did you keep your headspace so strong in that period of time? Because let's face it, you know, economic downturn or not, every person in their community or in their town might be dealing with that at different times in their practice life.
Yeah. And it's creating value, right? And then it's one of those things that we've taught our patients. Chiropractic isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And, you know, I always do a lot of analogies in our practice with dentistry because people understand the dental profession. I had somebody just the other day that she wanted to bring in her child. The husband was really skeptical of it and had said he didn't want to create a need for chiropractic and a dependency for chiropractic on a child. And I just told her, I said, here's the deal. Does he think the same thing about dentistry? Because you better never take your child to the dentist then, because that's going to create a dependency. He's going to have to go back to the dentist every 6 months for the rest of his life. And she just looked at me and she's like, that's really sassy. I'm like, that's not sassy, but it's just stating the facts. And the fact of the matter is we can't see our spine. And the line that we always hear within the profession is if your spine was on your face, you take better care of it. But it is really the truth. And so I do a lot of just trying to educate our patients as to why chiropractic is just the basis of their wellness regime. Whatever they're doing, their routine, chiropractic has got to be that base of it.
Yeah, it makes me think of when I was early in practice, and I'm in Ontario, I'm Canada here, and we had so some provincial coverage for chiropractic care, and it was really paltry. It was like $9 a visit, up to a maximum of $150. It was like a copay that people had, and then the government, phased that out, and a lot of docs were like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And a lot of us that were really, running wellness office, it was like, this is not going to make a difference. In fact, it's going to make our lives easier because that $150 really doesn't make much to their care, right? And if you really teach people the value of chiropractic, that's not going to make a difference. And we didn't notice any change in our practice during that time either. So that's awesome. So what are the main ways that you're educating people? Do you do in-house workshops? I know you've got the American Institute of Healthy Living for people in your practice and outside, but what are some of the key patient education strategies that you're doing right now?
My original ones that I always had done for a very long time was just actual classes and workshops within our practice. What I've seen is just as society, with the iPhone, with everybody and technology, everybody seems so busy. So what I've actually transitioned to is I have a private group for my patients on Facebook. And so we do a lot of Facebook Lives in there. We do a lot of just different nutrition classes in there, and it's interactive. And so that's how I now educate that. But I do a lot with social media that way, of even just my practice information. But it's also just table talk, making sure that we're focusing in on whatever aspect it is during their visit. My patients understand that if they're sick, they come in and get adjusted. I always laugh with them. I'm like, if they're puking, if they could stay at home, but if they have a head cold, come on in, but they understand that type of stuff. And it's just because trying to pull back whatever the conversation is that day and tying it back into chiropractic. But I also don't want to, I'm not that crazy person that's like, wait a minute, it's this, and I'm not yelling. If they want to talk about the weather, you can do that. But, yeah, I definitely I just watch what our conversations of what we're having. And my biggest thing is being a role model, right? That was something James Chestnut has taught years ago, but it's my patients now. I'm never going to tell them to do something that I'm not doing myself. Mm-hmm. And so it's just being that chiropractic, I guess, pillar for them in the community, and allowing them to see what a real wellness-based lifestyle is and what's possible for them.
Yeah, that always makes me think of something that, Dr. Patrick Chintempo always said, contradictions lead to destruction. So yes. If you are not being, authentic in how you're living your life, how can you, and the values that you share with people in your practice, healthy living, healthy, good sleep, food, how are they going to trust our recommendations on anything else? Or how are we going to trust ourselves on those recommendations is what I always think. Right. So I think it's Absolutely. My job to live a healthy lifestyle because of that. It's not a luxury. I choose health because it's one of my top values, but I also feel that it's one of our responsibilities as healthcare professionals.
I agree 100%.
Can we talk a little bit about having a private Facebook group for your practice? Because I've been tossing that idea around in my head for months now. And we've talked about it in different groups I've been part of, and there's been some, support and some people that have concerns around it. So can you share with us your experience with it?
In all honesty, with what we do, they're not asking health questions, or they're not asking personal health questions, or, hey, I've got this. So it's very much a nutrition group. We have a lot of recipes that people will share. I have some local farmers. I'm in a kind of rural area, so they share information in there as to, why your animals need to be grass-fed, et cetera. And just different resources that way. But then I will just let them know, hey, I'm going to go live at 8:00 tonight. And it's great to see some people will be, we'll pick a topic of whatever it is. And I just kind of put that vibe out there, asking them hey, what do you guys want me to talk about? I've got these ideas. And then they'll say, what about this? What about that? And that's how I roll with it. And we get a lot of good feedback. So is every one of my members, or every one of my practice members, a member of this group? No, not at all. There's a lot of people that aren't on Facebook, but I always just have them. I'm you need to request membership into this group. Here it is. I have little business cards made up with it. And it's a great value add, to be honest with you, for patients.
That's what I think. And I also think one of the things I love to do in my practice is connect people. So if there are people in the reception area and there's a family that I know is unschooling, for example, and then another family comes in, I like to connect them if it works out, if the conversation, and build relationships. I know people in my practice have, made business deals, and they've become new friends, and they have, found other connections within our community. So I think it's a great community builder. So thanks for sharing that. Now, when I listen to hear you talk and all the things that you're doing, you're obviously pretty fired up about health, about chiropractic. What keeps you, I have two questions for you. What keeps you so inspired? And this part two of that is who are some of the people that inspire you the most? Are there mentors or coaching programs and stuff that you've done?
Yeah. And you know what? I just came home from Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within. And so that is one of
No
those
wonder
things.
you're so fired up.
Right? I was like, no, I guess it's been a month ago, but I have an accountability group that I work with every Wednesday morning, and I've been in other accountability groups. So it is an amazing group on how we all just mesh together. We're all business owners, pretty much all very similar situations. And we spoke about it this morning, how we all go through the same type of cycles and how it's all at the same time period. And so we all just grow and learn from each other, but yet hold each other accountable. So I have to give huge props to that group, because it's the first time I've actually had an accountability group that is pretty spectacular.
So sorry, is that within chiropractic, or those are business owners? Okay.
Yeah, it's actually through the UAC, through the Ultimate Achievers Club with Patrick and Templates group. So those doctors are pretty spectacular that we have in my little accountability group. But, so many mentors within the chiropractic profession, right? I've mentioned Dr. Chestnut several times, but just his Wellness Diplomate program is what set me on like that path. But even looking at like Billy DeMoss is the same way. You know what I mean? He is definitely a role model for people and a role model for healthy living based in chiropractic. But there were I did a lot as a student involved in several, one of our national associations. So some of those helped groom me with leadership, which is pretty to know, like, this is where I'm at however many years down the road in Michigan. Like, it all stemmed from my time period while I was at Palmer. Dr. Riekman was the president at Palmer when I was there, and he's obviously a huge mentor as well. So yeah, there's a lot of them, but specifically what was your first question is something that took me right back to the Tony Robbins event. What inspires me is when he had us go through a couple different aspects of like limiting beliefs in our life. And it was one of those things to go back through and be like, I have to play full out. Like every single one of us has a responsibility, like why we are put on this earth. And if we're not playing full out, we're doing a disservice for why we're here, right? And that was one of my biggest realizations, was like, how can I do more to help more and serve more and give more? So that's probably what really, truly inspires me. To make sure that 100% at the end of the day, like I have given my all.
Yeah, it's making me think of two things. One, Billy obviously is a role model and inspiring guy for lots of people. And I will put a link in to our podcast episode that I was lucky enough to chat with him. But also it's making me think of my conversation with Dr. Alex Vidan, because he talked about being an immigrant, his family being immigrant. And what sets him off all the time is that the responsibility of his life being, what other people went through to get him there, and that there was a strict purpose for his life. And it's just that grounding that we take for granted sometimes, that we are here for a reason. And if we're not stepping into our power and into our light, then other people are missing out.
Right. And it's one of those things that I don't really, if people hear me speak in the profession, they know this story. But, my grandmother was pregnant with my dad. This is the reason, like, I am in chiropractic today. She was pregnant with my dad, and because of a heart condition, she was never told, but they told my grandfather, my Jaja, again, they came over from Poland, but, told him to take good care of her because she wasn't going to make it out of the pregnancy alive because of a heart condition. And it was chiropractic that, that saved her life, basically. And it was the fact that my grandmother was 30 when she was pregnant with my dad, and she lived to be 92. But I grew up in the 80s thinking it was normal for everybody's grandparents to be doing yoga, listening to Deepak Chopra, and feeding them probiotics, right? Like
yeah.
that. And when I look at it now, I remember one of my chiropractic friends meeting her, and I was like, wow, she's so highly educated. I was like, she wasn't educated. She learned everything on her own, but she was so passionate about chiropractic to the point that people thought she was crazy. And now, I understand why, but literally, if it wasn't for a stranger that told my great grandfather about chiropractic, like, I probably wouldn't be here. And so that's when people, I feel like they get scared to share to somebody about chiropractic for whatever issue they might be having. It's like, no, you don't know how many generations of people you're influencing just by having that little conversation with somebody.
Yeah, it's like what BJ said, you never know how far reaching something you think, say, or do will have the impact of other people.
Absolutely. And that's my favorite BJ Palmer quote. And that's why it strikes me to my core every single time I hear it.
You just don't know. You don't know a simple conversation you have, how that might light someone else's, path to help better living for themselves. And then, I mean, geez, we all have stories of people in our practice or people whose lives we've touched where, they were really close to taking their life, or they were really close to ending a relationship, or, changing a job, doing something that might not have been supportive, in their best interests. And because of our influence or because of adjustment, they get rerouted and find a new path for themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, speaking of leadership, you've definitely taken on a role within your organization, within your state, and also within the LCW. Let's talk a little bit about how you got involved with both those organizations.
I think it continued on from my time at Palmer, right? I had gone through some of the leadership roles in one of the national associations at Palmer, or national associations, but it was the Palmer chapter, right? And then I just wanted to stay involved in chiropractic. I always tell people I love chiropractors. Basically, if I only had friends that were chiropractors, that would be okay with me. Right? Because we're so like-minded. And so it was my way to stay involved within chiropractic. So I just started serving at our district levels here, and then I've worked my way up. And so into the leadership positions here in Michigan. But the same thing with LCW. I love the fact that the League of Chiropractic Women, they've been around now since March of 2012. And there is something unique about the way women are within our profession. And, I love the organization. I love what it stands for in supporting all women in chiropractic regardless. And so, I've seen some amazing offices where that spouse is the one that's running the front desk, and they're running basically not just the front desk, they're running the show. And so I love the fact that we've got amazing, brilliant minds of chiropractic assistants. We've got spouses, because think of that with the male doctors to have their female, their spouse, they're making the decisions that we make as holistic healthcare practitioners. So you think of what's going on with the children at home and all of that. And for them to have that support system, I love that with the League of Chiropractic Women. And I've always said, I look at my CAs and they have chosen a different life for their children based off of the philosophy of chiropractic because of where they work. And so to have that just support system is something that I just think is brilliant.
Yeah, and there's just different. I agree with you 100%. There's a reason why we all have a really good time together when you are at a conference or some kind of chiropractic event, because there is such a commonality of our values and just this, I don't know, I always feel like it's like I'm putting on a cozy sweater. Like you're with people who really get what you're talking about, and you just have a different experience than you would with other friends. But so let's talk a little bit. You guys have a retreat coming up, and I'm really excited to be part of it. What can people expect at the retreat in Arizona? I mean, first of all, great location, especially being someone from Michigan. I'm from, Canada here too. So I'm looking forward to going down south in November. But what else tell us about it?
So it's the LCW retreat. It's the first weekend in November, and it's always the first weekend in November. So ladies, put it on your schedule. But it is specifically for relaxation. We call it Spiz and Spa, and I didn't realize there were a lot of people within the chiropractic profession that didn't understand Spiz. So that is Spizzerinctum. That's a BJ Palmer term. That's the philosophy and the excitement for chiropractic. But it's not an event where we're sitting there for 4 days listening to speakers nonstop, right? We have 4 amazing speakers. You are one of them. And it's all about just bringing in that excitement for chiropractic. We have a lot of speakers that are even talking with self-care and that type of stuff this time around. But we have our meals together. We're at a beautiful resort. Last year, it was the grand opening while we were there that weekend. You have spa time. We have workout time for people that want to do an organized workout. We have Heather Deniston from Well Fit and Fed, that blog. She will be doing workouts for people that want to do that. But if people just want to go for a stroll or they want to hike, they can do that. But what I really love about this weekend is just sitting and connecting with the other women in the profession around the pool, because that's when we can sit there and say, hey, what's working in practice, or I had this issue, or whatever it is. And it's also just having time with your girlfriends and just that connection. So it starts Friday afternoon with a champagne toast, and it runs through Saturday evening with our dinner. And then, I'll be staying a little bit longer on Sunday just to get, absorb as much vitamin D as I can before heading back to Michigan. But that is the connection. And it's those relationships. The first one that I went to was in 2012 in Tampa with the LCW. And it's great to see the strongest female friendships that I have within chiropractic have stemmed from the League of Chiropractic Women from these retreats.
Yeah, and I will also put in a link, listeners, to my conversation on the show with Dr. Cheryl Schmidt, because she spoke really highly of her experience at the retreat and just how it really grounded her in connecting with other women, but also really getting clear on the kind of practice that she wanted for herself and her family, you know, as a mom of four, and just feeling like she had a really great support around her. So definitely check that out, listeners. All the links to the retreat and everything you need to know about the LCW will be in our show notes. So, you know, we've talked about a lot of things, Lisa, and I'm reading your bio here real quick, and you say, you know, you're still running the practice of your dreams. What does the practice of your dreams look like?
My dreams is literally that family wellness practice. I love the fact that people come in and they count me as their number one wellness practitioner. So that's when they come in and they run their questions past me, or they just look at me as that resource for that community. And that's what I love. And just to see, to put the perspective of, you know, when I was first in practice, to see that some of the high schoolers or the junior high students that I was taking care of then, who now I've seen them through their college years, their grad school years, and now they're having families of their own, and they bring in those newborns to me. Like, that is pretty spectacular. And like I said, I still think I'm 25, so I'm not sure how this has happened.
I know. You're not alone in that one. You're not alone there, that's for sure. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, I like that I'm a primary care stop for people, mm-hmm. and that families will come here if their little one is sick, or call me or ask a question because they're choosing health and wellness for their family, and they don't want to rely on pharmaceuticals, and they don't want to rely on that sort of outside in approach. They want to look at their health and get their children adjusted, but also just try to figure out the cause of what the body is dealing with. And I love being that resource for people as well.
Yeah.
So last question for you. I mean, your definition of success for yourself, you've obviously worked with Tony Robbins, you've worked with some other great mentors. Has your definition of success for Dr. Lisa changed over the years?
Yeah, you know, and I think Cheryl probably, I haven't listened to the podcast, but I would bet anything she feels very similarly. I think in our profession, it has been such a conversation from stage where it's like numbers, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, numbers can show and translate to the amount of people that you're serving and all of that, but you need to be fulfilled at the end of the day. And that's my definition of success, to know that I am doing my best at not, that sounds mediocre. That was a better way to say that I have given my all, and that I'm like literally playing full out, and that is success, right? Having that balance, and not just 100% work, but just having true balance in life.
Yeah, I was thinking that this morning. You know, before we chatted, I had a workout, and then I was down at where I lived. There's a beautiful bay, and I sat down there, and I was just having my coffee, and I was thinking how much I value my lifestyle, and mm-hmm. I love my practice, and I love the business, and I love everything else I do, but I wouldn't want only to have that in my life and not have the other side of some quality, you know, whether it's time for me to work out with a trainer, or time to sit and relax at the water, or time to be with my kids or my partner, whatever it is. You know, to me, that's equally as important in how I define success as a human being. So thank you for sharing that, because a lot of times we can get really wrapped up in only one metric of success.
Absolutely. And it's definitely just being balanced and grateful for all that you have, right?
Mm-hmm. So if there was one thing that you would want docs to know, what would you say that would be? Like, if you had one gem of wisdom from being in practice for 15 years, you know, there's lots of new docs listening, there's students listening. What would you say to docs?
One action step that I would give them is really, and this is something that I start my morning with, is to look at everything that you're grateful for. Because depending on where you are in practice right now, you might be saying, oh, you know, I only saw one new patient this month, or whatever it is, if they're brand new in practice. Be grateful for that one new patient. Be grateful for the fact that you have the opportunity to have had the education and all of that. And so I always, originally I started out with a list of just writing down 5 things that I was grateful for every single day. And I started out by doing it at the end of the day, but I decided to start this as my intention for the day. But write down for as long as possible. And that gratitude, you will be shocked at how it grows into abundance in all aspects of your life. How about that?
Yeah, and I think too, like when I sit there and do it, you can't just stop at 5. Oftentimes you start at 5 and you just keep going, and you know, it changes your physiology. I know Tony Robbins talks about this, but you put your hand on your heart and you start to feel just your own energy shift and that fullness and that any stress, if you were carrying it, it just melts away. So, and it can be hard sometimes at different stages of life to remember that, but there's always things to be grateful for. And oftentimes things are not as bad as we think they are. They're just our own little monkey brain is making them seem worse than they are.
Right. And especially whatever they're going through at that time period, it's perfect for whatever is supposed to be. And there's always a lesson to be learned, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing, and just is shifting that perspective, because I know, when I was first in practice, I was always comparing myself. Like, was I doing good enough in comparison to so-and-so? And that was the worst thing I could have done. So just stop comparing and just knowing that you are where you need to be right now.
That is a great way for us to wrap the show. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Lisa Olszewski. Did I get it right
Perfect.
There? And again, listeners, everything you need to know to connect more with Dr. Lisa and find out more about her practice and the LCW and everything else she has going on will be in those show notes. So have an awesome rest of your day, Lisa.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here today. If you like this show, please share it with another chiropractor and connect them with this message. We are always better off together than we are alone. If you haven't yet subscribed, head on over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes, and don't forget to rate and review the show while you're there. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram and Facebook and find out more about today's guests and all things Rockstar Doctor Life by clicking in those show notes. See you next time.